Thanks very much. One of the momentous things in any society is the creation of a new form of organization. And in history, many organizational changes have been rather bad for parts of the human race, but the change that I'm going to be talking about today is actually good news for almost everyone. It's more satisfying for the people doing the work. It is, in fact, creating more delight for the people for whom the work is done, and it's more productive for the organization. It is something that makes more money for the organization. In fact, it makes exponentially more money for the organization. So this is good news for almost everyone. We're talking about the transformation of management and leadership in pretty much every major organization around the world. And as Reinhold said, I did in fact ask the world, does anyone have a better idea? Is there a better idea out there in management? So what you're going to hear today is in fact the results of that, the single best management idea in the world. And let me... All right. And this is not a fad. This is not something that was cooked up last night and will evaporate tomorrow. This is something that's in fact been brewing and been gathering momentum for several decades around the world. And it has deep roots here in Europe and in Asia and in the Americas. In fact, there is a whole body of reliable knowledge about how this works and why it works. And in fact, here in Scandinavia, some of the very best implementations are taking place. So this, in fact, is a very good fit with Scandinavian culture. And let me explain what this is about from my own personal experience. As I look around my life, I see two kinds of stuff. There is stuff that works perfectly, and there is stuff that doesn't. And in the stuff that works perfectly, I have my Nespresso coffee machine, I've got my Olympus recorder, I've got my Amazon Kindle, I've got my iPod and my iPhone. And in the stuff that doesn't work, I've got my PC that takes forever to start up, and my TV that has lots of glitches. And so those, I could go on, but let me turn back to the stuff that works perfectly for me. You'll notice that in this collection of stuff, there are a couple of products from Apple. And I am rather irritated to have to admit that, because I am not an Apple fan. I was a PC man from way back, and I had a PC, not an Apple, and I laughed at those people who struggled with their Apple III, their Macintosh, their Newton, these pretty little toys that had no software. It was all hype and no software. So I laughed at those people. So I'm not an Apple fan. But in due course, the iPod came out, and I laughed at that, another pretty little toy from Apple. And I'm not going to pay any attention to that, but in due course I did need a music player, and so I got an iPod, and I found, hey, it was actually pretty cool. And well, okay, one thing, they did okay. And then, of course, later on, they had an iPhone came out, and I thought, oh my God, no, more hype from Apple. Another pretty toy, not serious. But I didn't have a mobile phone at the time. I didn't like being interrupted by phone calls. But eventually I succumbed to social pressure. I got an iPhone, and it was okay. I wasn't particularly thrilled with it, and it worked okay. And so when my daughter said that she would like to have an iPhone, I said, well, why don't you take mine? I mean, I don't really need this. I can just buy a cheap mobile phone, and you can have my iPhone. So I gave her my iPhone, and I bought a cheap mobile phone. Ouch! It was not at all what I expected. Sadly, all of the things that were so convenient, that were so easy, all of the syncing that happened just automatically, none of that was there. And so I was irritated, and after a couple of months, I threw it away, got an iPhone. And that little experience, trivial as it sounds, that is part of this epic shift in the marketplace that I'm talking about. Because when I threw away that iPhone, I was signifying I threw away that mobile phone, I am signifying I am the boss of the market. I am the boss of Apple. I am now able to decide whether to use this cheap phone or the iPhone. They have to respond to that. And this is part of this massive shift in the power in the marketplace from the seller to the buyer. The buyer is now the boss. The buyer is now in charge of the marketplace. So when Apple puts out a mediocre mapping app that disappoints me and everyone else, then Tim Cook has to get down on bended knee and apologize to me and promise never, ever to do that again, because he knows, Tim Cook knows that I am his boss, and if he doesn't delight me, I might fire him. So this is a massive, massive shift in the marketplace. And when companies, unlike Apple, didn't grasp this, they started to notice that they were making less money and found that more and more difficult. And even market leaders found it difficult to maintain their leadership positions in the marketplace. One of those sad stories is right here in Scandinavia at Nokia. In 2004, Nokia was the world's leading maker of mobile phones. They were powerful, they were rich, they were impregnable, and here they were living in this marvelous glass castle in their impregnable, power-rich position. And a funny thing happened in 2004. A couple of Nokia workers made a presentation to the senior management of Nokia and said, look, we have an interesting idea. We've come up with a new kind of phone, quite unlike Nokia's existing phones. It has a big, bright color screen. It connects to the internet, and it actually doesn't have a keyboard like the Nokia phones. It has this touch screen where you can operate the phone by touching the screen. And we think this could be a big idea. Nokia's management looked at this prototype and they said, well, that's interesting, but this would be hugely disruptive to all of our big marketing and development plans, and everyone in the organization would object if we disrupted those plans, and it's risky. It might not work. So we're going to put this on a back burner, and we'll continue with those big marketing and production plans that we have. And that's what happened. And for the next 3 years, it looked as though Nokia had made the right decision. In fact, they made a ton of money, and the top executives made a ton of money for the next 3 years. But then in 2007, something happened. Kaboom! Out of nowhere, a firm that had never been in the mobile phone market suddenly emerged with the iPhone. And it thrilled customers around the world, and it devastated Nokia's market share, and it devastated their share value. They have now lost 80% of the share value that they have since 2004, a catastrophic result. And the managers who made that decision in 2004 no longer work there, and 25,000 employees have lost their job or about to lose their job. And Nokia has been downgraded by Moody's recently to junk status. So this is bad news for Nokia. But the point of this story is it's not just Nokia. It's pretty much every large organization in the world that is looking at this. If you look at this chart, this is a chart of 20,000 US firms, the largest US firms from 1965 to 2011, and it's showing the rates of return on assets and the rates of return on invested capital, and it is basically a disaster. It shows that in 1965, those rates were around 5 or 6%, and now they're just down around 1%, a 75% decline. So if you're a chief executive and you are looking at this chart, you are looking at a death sentence. You are looking down the barrel of a gun, because if you are a firm that's only making 1% on your assets or your invested capital, your firm is not long for this world. You are in a very difficult situation. And when firms in the mid-80s, early 80s, started noticing that they were having more difficulty making money, they started doing all sorts of desperate things that you read about in management journals. They had management fixes, they kept reorganizing, they launched marketing initiatives, they launched sales initiatives, they bought new companies, they tried to shed the losing companies, they did all of these desperate things, but as you can see from this chart, none of that worked. They didn't address the basic thing that was happening in the world, namely this shift in power from the seller to the buyer. And so those firms continued to have major problems. But there were some bold rebels, some bold revolutionaries who said, what if? What if we addressed this basic assumption? What if we created firms that were totally focused on the buyer, totally focused on the customer, totally focused on the client? What would that kind of organization look like? Could it make money? We knew how to make money on a small scale, but could we make money on a large scale if we totally focused on delighting our customer? And here are a couple of examples. The first, I hate to admit, is once again Apple. Sorry about that. But in 1997, Apple was practically bankrupt. It had become a bumbling bureaucracy. It delighted a niche group, but it was not a serious firm at that point. It was about to go bankrupt. And Steve Jobs came back not only to try to rescue the firm, but to test out this hypothesis: is it possible to create an organization totally focused on delighting its customer? And if you could, would it make any money? And he tried this 20 years ago and failed, but now he had a second chance. And he looked around the organization and started asking, who is actually adding value to customers? Is what you do, does that add value to customers? And he looked at the 4,000 middle managers in Apple and said, you are not contributing anything to customer value, so you're gone. He looked at the R&D department and asked the same question and couldn't see that they were adding any value to Apple's customers. And so you're gone too. And he proved that you could access the best knowledge in the world. If you had good people, you didn't need to have an R&D department. He showed that when he put out the iPhone, in something developed in 18 months from start to finish, and an organization that had never done anything in the field before. And so they transformed the music business, he transformed the phone business, he transformed the tablet business, amazing impact on the world, and did this by having whole large numbers of small self-organizing teams totally focused on delighting the customer. And answered the question, is it possible to make money by delighting the customer on a large scale? Well, yes, actually, it is. It not only makes money, it makes humongous amounts of money. Apple went from being on the brink of bankruptcy to the largest market cap company in the whole wide world in just 15 years. So this not only makes money, it makes enormous, but exponentially amounts of money, 9,000% increase in share value over that period. Another example, Salesforce. Mark Benioff is the chief executive of this organization, provides software services on a global basis, headquartered in San Francisco. In 2011, Mark Benioff was named by Forbes as the most valuable manager on the planet. The most valuable manager on the planet. And how did that happen? Well, in 2006, he was head of this fast-growing startup, but he saw that it was rapidly becoming another bureaucracy, another slow-moving bureaucracy that couldn't innovate, and he decided to do something different. He drew on a whole set of expertise, knowledge in the software field, an approach that's been around for several decades, so he didn't invent this approach, but he applied it and showed what it could accomplish and became one of the very best exponents of this in the world. And what does it involve? Well, what happens is in a bureaucracy, you have departments that have big budgets and big plans. And in this approach, what you do is you ask, well, what are the most important things in the organization for customers? And then once you've established that, then you ask, what is the most important thing? The most important thing in the whole firm for our customers. And then you ask, well, who are the best people, the very best people in the firm to work on the most important thing? And what happens in a bureaucracy, say in Nokia, all the middle managers leap up and say, well, you can't have those people because they're very important to me to make my targets. So I'm going to keep those people, and you'll have to find somebody else to work on this thing. But in this approach, you say, is this the most important thing in the firm or not? If it's the most important thing in the firm, then these people must work on it. So you assemble those people and ask them, what do you think you could accomplish in terms of customer outcomes in, say, a month? And they tell you what they could accomplish, and then you say, right, go away and produce that. At least that, maybe more if you can, but at least that, and we will not interrupt you. We will not bother you. This is the most important thing in the firm. And if there's anything that's causing you a problem, let us know. We'll remove it because this is the most important thing. If there's anything you need, let us know. This is the most important thing. Go for it. Make the most important thing for our customers happen in a month. And then you go, what's the second most important thing in the firm? And who are the best people to work on that? And you work steadily down the most important things in the firm. And what you find, of course, is that you then have, instead of just 20% of the people in the organization working on the most important things, you have 80% of the people working on the most important things. And at the end of the month, you ask, well, what's happened? What did you produce for customers? And you evaluate that, and you learn, and you move on to another month. And what you see as a result of doing this, you have a firm that's able to learn and adjust very rapidly. You don't have to wait a couple of years to find out that some big project is never going to get anywhere. You find that out in the first month or two, and so you can adjust. And this involves changes for everyone in the organization. It is more productive, it's more satisfying to workers because finally you can actually get on with your job and do the job that you wanted to do all the time. And you got an impediment, you can get that resolved. And so it's more productive for the workers, but you are, well, it is more challenging. For the managers, they must actually be more decisive. They have to be more decisive about priorities. They can't just wait to see which way the corporate wind is blowing. They actually have to decide. And for the workers themselves, they are responsible now, not only for deciding what they can accomplish, but actually producing it. Unlike a bureaucracy, there's nowhere to hide. So this is more challenging for both the managers and the workers, but it is more productive. It does make money. It answers the question, is it possible to make money doing this? Yes, you make exponential amounts of money. And so this is now spreading from software into making cars, and making industrial repairs, and making clothes, even building submarines, anything where you have something where you're trying to delight customers. And what we're talking about here is a fundamental paradigm shift in management in the strict sense of what Thomas Kuhn said. This is a different way, a different mental model of the world, a different ecosystem, and not an ecosystem where it is an organization inwardly focused, bureaucratic, hierarchical, to one that is totally focused on the customer. It is a fundamental shift. So many of the things that you read in business textbooks, in business journals, what is taught in business schools, a lot of that has to be replaced with a different set of assumptions, a different mental model of management, a new goal for the organization, a new role for managers, new way of coordinating work, new values in the organization, a new way of communicating horizontally rather than vertically. So this is different. And as I say, it's more humanistic, but more important than it being humanistic, this generates not just a little bit more money, a lot more money. The humanistic management has obviously been talked about for 90 years, but it hasn't taken off because the question was, well, humanistic management is good, but it will cost us more. This ends up costing us less. This ends up making much more money than the bureaucratic way of managing that is prevalent still in big organizations. So that is my suggestion for you. This is everyone's responsibility. It's not just about big celebrity CEOs like Steve Jobs or Mark Benioff. This revolution is happening in thousands of organizations around the world, mostly on a small scale, in teams, in units, in departments, in some whole organizations, particularly small organizations, and some medium-sized organizations, and now some very large organizations having very spectacular results. And even organization like General Electric, if you go inside that organization, you will find there are whole segments. You look at GE Healthcare, you have a whole sleeper cell of revolutionaries pursuing this approach, and this is like an unstoppable virus that will, in fact, take over all big organizations because it is more productive, it makes more money. So that's my challenge to you. This change is coming to your workplace, whether you're interested in it or not, so it's a good idea to find out about it, become part of it. You might decide, well, I'll just wait. I'll wait and see what happens, and somebody else might bring it to my organization. Well, the danger is that you may end up like the managers or the 25,000 workers at Nokia, where it was too late and they were crushed by this revolution happening in the world. So that's my suggestion. Find out about it, learn about it, become part of it, lead this paradigm shift. It's going to happen. It's not a question of whether it's going to happen. The only question is when. So that's my question for you. Why not now? Thank you.